Hey guys, this is Matt for cgtuts.com, and this is the second part of the Boss Tu-2 tutorial using Modo 302. Now in this part we're going to be carrying on from where we left off in part 1. We're going to add in the rest of the details that you can see in yellow here. So we're not going to get up to the screen in this one, but we're going to add in a lot of stuff and learn a couple of new techniques along the way. So let's get started. Okay, so if you load up scene 3 from where we left off, we're now going to go in and add the detail to this bottom pad. So I'm going to go into the bottom view. And you see we've got these two indents to create, this one here with the kind of hard edges and this one with the rounded edges. Now to do that I'm going to activate the slice tool by hitting Shift C on my keyboard and then dragging across to create these lines. I'm going to hold down Shift and drag again, and that reactivates the tool without you having to drop it, and just add in all of these lines across here. And then with symmetry on the X I'm going to add in one line down there, and because symmetry's on we've added it here as well. I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and that gives us these two polygons to play with. Now what I'm going to do is hit the B key on my keyboard for bevel. I'm going to bevel them in slightly, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then I'm going to bevel them in again, so I'm going to hit Shift and click in the viewport to reactivate the tool. Bring them in slightly, and then I'm going to go to Perspective View and shift them down into the pedal. So something like that looks good, so that's minus 2.2 millimeters. Then I'm going to drop it by hitting space. Then we can go in and start adding in our bevels. So I'm going to switch over to Edges mode and start selecting these edges here. So I'm holding down Shift to add them all to the selection. And then I'm going to hit B, right click and drag out on the blue handle. You notice immediately we get a smoothing error down here on the bottom. We've got this kind of blackened corner here. There's a lightened corner over there, and we'll sort that out in a second. You'll notice, however, we don't get that around the indent, and that's because we added this row of polygons surrounding it. Now if they weren't there, we'd be getting the exact same smoothing errors as in here out towards the edges of the pedal. But adding in that row of polygons solves that, so insetting and then insetting again is a good solution to that problem. So I'm going to select this guy in the middle and add in an extra row of polygons. And notice if I click off, there's no more smoothing errors. So we need to do this for this polygon as well. So I'm going to select both of these corner edges as we're trying to round these. I'm going to add in that extra one and do that down here as well. And then I'm going to go to the bottom view. If we zoom in, I'm going to hit B, right click, and I can just drag to the right in my viewport to get out that corner. And you'll notice our round level is nowhere near enough, so I'm going to pull that up to 3 and then try and match that reference as closely as I can. Now that looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit off that, deselect and go back to perspective mode. Now we've noticed that we've got a couple problems going on at the moment. This corner and these corners down here are multi-sided. They're not quad polygons or tri-polygons. Neither in fact are these corners, which were created on that rounded bevel, or these side polys. Now I'm going to activate the edge slice tool, which is the C key on your keyboard, and then I'm going to go in and split up these n-gons or multi-sided polygons into quads and tris. And that'll just make the model a little bit easier to deal with. So I'm going to zoom in and drag an edge from this corner to the middle of this rounded edge. I'm going to do the same thing for here. And select all of these edges and hit backspace on my keyboard to delete them. So what we've done is created a quad polygon there. Now what we need to do is use the slice tool again, so C on your keyboard, to create some tris and quads around it. Okay, so these ones are done. As you'll see, all of these are now tris and quads. So I'm going to come up here to this top corner. I'm going to split this one up as well. So I've split these up into quad polygons, but they're a little bit difficult to see right now because of the grid. So I'm going to turn that off temporarily by coming to Texture, Visibility Options, Show Grid. That kind of makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So all of these are now quads. So now all I'm going to do is repeat this down here on both of these edges. So come in here, edge slice to the middle, edge slice to the middle, delete these edges, and then split it using the edge slice tool. Okay, so now all of these are quads or tri-polygons, which is kind of what I was aiming for with this model. So on both sides, all of these base polygons are now correct, and we can add in the bevels in here. So I'm going to double click this edge to select this edge loop. and I'm going to double click this edge loop, and you'll notice that it doesn't select the entire edge, and this is a bug in Modo sometimes. When you've got a large n-gon, it's called a multi-sided polygon, sometimes it doesn't select the surrounding edge, the bordering edge, but there's another handy way of doing it. What you can do is select the polygon, hold down shift on your keyboard, and you notice that the edges button up here turns to plus bounds, and if you click it, it adds that boundary edge to the current selection. And with them both selected, we can hit B on the keyboard, right click, and drag out that edge bevel. Now our round level's too much, so I'm going to turn that down to 0. And then we've got this weird smoothing error on this bottom polygon, so just like before, we'll select it and add in an extra row of polygons by insetting it. And that gets rid of the smooth problem, and that is the base done. So all we need to do now is triple this main polygon in here, and by triple I mean convert this so that it is exactly like before, quads or tries. Now there are a couple ways you can do it. You can either do it manually, so you can come in here with the edge slice tool and start dragging out some edges across there like this. We'll do the same up there, so with the edge slice tool, so this gives us this nice quad polygon in the middle, and then we've just got these small ones at the edge to contend with. But there is another method that you can use, and if you come to the polygon menu, you notice you get the triple command, which is Shift T, and if you hit Shift T with the current polygon selected, what it does is it splits those up as best as it can into tri-polygons. Next we're going to be creating this boss logo, but before we do I'm going to quickly save our scene. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, 4 indents, done, and hit Save. Now as with everything in 3D modeling, there are a couple ways you can do this. Initially I came in here with the pen tool and just drew out the logo, but we're going to take advantage of Modo's curve system. Now Modo can import EPS or AI curves from vector programs such as Illustrator or Photoshop and use them as mesh items from which you can extrude edges or faces or polygons. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to come up here to File and click on Import. We're going to go to the reference folder, and you'll see I've got this boss.eps file. Now I managed to find this on the internet. I can't include it with the download, but I'm going to provide you a link to get it yourself. So if you get that one and import it by double clicking it, you'll see over here in the item list we get a boss group, inside of which is this curves mesh layer. Now if I go to perspective mode and have a look around, you'll see these boss curves have been placed up over here. So I'm going to zoom in on these guys. Now for me, I don't know if it's for everyone else, but in Modo 302 the curve system is a little bit buggy. It occasionally decides to crash on me, so I'm going to do what I can to try and avoid that by getting the curves that we need and extruding the edges out, and then copying it to new layer and getting rid of them. So we only have the curves here for a smaller period as we need, basically. So what I'm going to do is in polygon mode, I'm going to come in and start selecting some of these curves. And what you'll notice is that if I select this O here, instead of selecting the entire O, we've only selected that outer line, and that's because they are in fact curves. There's no polys here at all. So I'm going to have to select that inner line as well. I'm going to select both of the edges, so I'm just holding down Shift here. And I'm going to hit the X key on my keyboard for the polygon extrude, if I can hit it. There you go, X for the polygon extrude tool. What I'm going to do is right click in the viewport, and then we're going to drag back along the Z axis to extend these polys out. Now what I'm going to do is hit space to deselect them, and then I'm going to select all of these polygons that we just created. Make sure I get all of them. I'm going to hit Control X on my keyboard and come and create a new mesh layer, which I'll call boss logo. And then hit Control V to paste them into there. And then what we can do is just delete this boss group. Right click and delete. Say the boss as child items because there's something inside of that group, so it's warning us. So I'm going to hit yes, and all of that is gone and we're now safe. So just in case, I'm going to come up here and quickly save our scene to File, Save As, and we'll call it 5 Logo Extrude, and hit Save. So now we're good. If anything crashes or goes wrong, we can come back to this scene, which is what we want. Now you notice some of these polygons are facing the wrong way, so I'm going to go in and flip them around. So in polygon mode, I'm going to double click this guy, double click both of these, and the S's as well, and hit F on my keyboard to flip them around. And then we can go and create these front faces. So I'm going to go to edge mode and select this front loop. I hit the back loop there. I'll try and avoid doing that. So just this front loop, there you go. And as soon as that's selected, hit P on your keyboard to create a polygon. And I'm going to do the same for the S. So I'm going to go over to here and hit P on my keyboard. And you notice nothing happened. And if we go to the back, there's nothing there as well. So something strange is going on here. So we have to figure that out. So let's have a look. Now, have we got an extra polygon on the edge? Don't think so. Why don't I try going and edge slicing and see what happens there. So you see that we didn't see anything from either side, so it wasn't a flipped polygon problem or anything like that. The issue with it is that this is just too complicated to create a polygon that displays correctly, essentially. It's going to be there, but it's going to be kind of ghosted. It's not going to be viewable because it's trying to fit in around all of these verts. Now, by cutting a single edge in it, what I've done is made this a bit simpler, and Modo can now cope with the shape. So that's a really good thing to look out for. Now, sometimes I've done it, and you kind of hit P and nothing happens, and you hit P again and nothing happens, and you hit P again. You end up with a ton of polygons in the same shape, and that can really affect you later on. So it's always good to check this first by creating an edge. So I imagine we're going to have to do the same for this S. So I'm going to select that front, hit P, nothing shows up around the back as well, so I'm just going to hit C on my keyboard for the edge slice tool and draw in a random edge across it, like that, and there's our front face. Now the O and this shape at the end are equally as complicated. If we were to just select this outer edge and hit P, we don't get anything. But if we hit the edge slice tool and do that across, we do get a polygon, but it doesn't take into account this center section here. So how can we get that to be included within the bounds of this polygon? So I'm going to hit Control Z twice to undo that, because remember we made the polygon show by creating the edge and then actually made the polygon, so that's 2 undo steps. Now what I'm going to do is create a polygon by myself. So I'm going to go to Vert Mode and Shift Select 4 verts. Now the important thing is that 2 of the verts have got to be in the outer bit and 2 of the verts have got to be on the inner bit. And if I hit P, it creates a polygon linking them. So what I've done now is linked the inner and the outer sections, so we don't have these separate groups of polygons anymore. There are one group. Now if we double click in here and select this edge loop and then hit P, we get the front face of the O correctly created. And this is the same that we're going to have to do over here, because we actually have 2 different meshes. If I was to just create this outer one by hitting that and hitting P, again we get no polygon because it's being a little bit crazy. I'm going to hit edge slice and draw a line. So we get this bit here, but we don't get this kind of inner shape included in that. So we're going to have to do the same thing. So I'm going to undo twice and then create a polygon, looking for a good place to do it. Kind of over here I think would be good. So what I'm going to do is just select 4 verts, 2 on the outer side, 2 on the inner side, and hit P to create a polygon between them. And then I'm going to double click this edge loop and hit P, and we create that one as well. Now if you didn't care about poly count, you could basically bevel these edges and call this done, but our brief was to create a low poly photorealistic item, something that is still high detailed but uses the least amount of polys possible. So the fun part, what we need to do is come in here and get rid of all of these extra edges that we don't need. For instance, on this side here we've got this edge at the very top of this polygon, and an edge at the bottom that we need to keep, so somewhere down there. Not all of those, just one of those. But all of these guys in the middle, we can basically get rid of those. So I'm going to select all of them and hit backspace on my keyboard to get rid of them. And we need to do that for all of these around here. Now I'm going to do the same things on the corners essentially, but we want to keep some detail, so instead of deleting all of the edges, I'm going to come in here and delete every second edge just for the corners. So you do that and then hit backspace to get rid of them, and we still maintain a good amount of detail in there which is suitable for us. So what I'm going to do is go away and pause the recording now and get rid of all of the extra edges. If I come across any problems I'll let you know, but hopefully I'll see you with a nicely reduced boss logo. Now before I get too far, because I hate it when people do that and kind of cut and then magically the entire thing is done, you know, like what, how do they do that? I don't really understand. Before I get too far, I wanted to quickly give you 2 little tips on how to do a couple of extra things. Now you notice on the top corner some of these edges are very close together and it gets a little bit tricky, to select them and kind of get the right ones, because all we're after really is this very corner edge. Now an easier way of doing that would be to come to the front view, to zoom in on the corner, then come up to Texture, Visibility Options, and Show Verts, and it shows all of the verts in the scene as these black dots, and obviously these verts are connected to edges going away from us. So what we can do is come in to this very corner, and lasso select around this vert on either side. And if you hold down shift, you notice I've got one edge selected. Hold down shift and lasso select this vert. You see I've got two edges selected. I can grab these guys as well, holding down shift the whole time, so I've got 6 edges selected. If I go back to perspective mode and then just hit backspace on my keyboard, we get rid of all of those corner edges, and it becomes a lot easier just to get these guys and delete them. The other thing I quickly want to draw attention to is how many edges should you leave before a curve. And remember on the bottom of the pedal when we inset it before we beveled in to get rid of any shading problems. So what I would say is always leave an extra polygon. So this guy looks to be pretty much pointing straight up, so this is kind of the end of the curve. But what I'd say is leave an extra polygon as well, and then start deleting edges. And the same goes for the tops of the B's over here. So we've got this curve, and then I'd say probably leave this guy and then delete these, and then the same for down in here. So yeah, good luck. There's a ton of edges here to delete, but I'll see you back in a minute. Okay, so I'm almost done. As you can see, things are looking a lot simpler already. There's just a couple of extra edges to take care of. Now on this front section, on this first bit, we need to get rid of these 2 edges here, so I'm going to select them and hit backspace. You notice this deletes the polygon, so I'm going to select the edge loop by double clicking it and hit P to fill it back in. I'm then going to come across to the O. Now we've got these 2 edges here, and we always need to maintain a link between the outer loop of polygons and the inner loop of polygons, and they're currently doing that, but I'd prefer them to really be in a place that we want as opposed to just randomly in the middle. So what I'm going to do is use the edge slice tool, come in here and draw an extra edge between the start of this curve and the start of this curve. Once that's done, we can then select these guys and delete them. Now I'm going to do the same for the S. So we've got this kind of randomly in the middle here, but what I want to do is start at this curve and then come down to here, and then we can delete that guy. Now you notice that I've done this first S, but I haven't done the second S yet. That's because they're essentially the same, so there's no point in doing it twice. So I'm going to grab this guy in polygon mode by double clicking, move it back on the Z axis, and then going to select this guy by double clicking, come to the front view, hit Control C on my keyboard, Control V to copy and paste, and then move it into position. And once it's there, we can go back to perspective mode and grab this back S, and instead of hitting backspace I'm going to hit delete. Now if I hit backspace on this, because we're in polygon mode, it deletes all of the polygons but keeps the verts, whereas if I undo that and hit delete, it deletes everything that makes up those polygons. So delete is what you want to use there. So I'm now going to go ahead and add in some bevels. And the first ones I'm going to add are going to be the ones surrounding these front faces. So instead of coming in here and selecting all these edges manually, which would take a long time, I'm going to use the plus bounds trick we used earlier. So I'm going to go to poly mode and select all of these front faces by holding down shift. And with them selected, I'm going to come up to here and holding down shift, click on plus bounds. So that switches to edge mode with all of these edges selected. And then I'm going to hit B on my keyboard for bevel, right click, and drag out a bevel. So something around there looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and then we can go on and start adding in our other bevels. Okay, before we add in the edge bevels there's a polygon missing over here that was a result of adding in the bevels around the front faces that we're going to add back in. So I'm going to quickly double click that edge loop and hit P. And then what we're going to do is add in an extra row of polygons around this front face. So I'm going to select all of these front faces, including that extra polygon that we just created. All of these guys. I'm going to hit B on my keyboard, right click, and we're just going to inset these in just a tiny bit, like about 50, something like that, just a very small amount. And what that does basically is it takes care of any smoothing problems we might have after we bevel these edges. So if I come into the top here, you'll see that if we look at this middle row of polygons, on this side we've got this edge linking these 2 corners, whereas on this side we don't have that edge. And what that's going to do is just kind of increase our workload, and I'll show you what I mean. If I double click this guy and bevel it, it's going to automatically create this quad polygon in the middle, whereas if I select these, that edge loop and this edge loop, and bevel it, it's not going to automatically create that poly. So we're going to have to come in there with the edge slice tool and add it in ourselves. So the easier way to get around that would be to, before we bevel it, use the edge slice tool to just join that up. And if we go in, it will create that poly for us. So it's just going to save us a little bit of work. So what I'm going to do is basically go around all of these 90-degree corners And if there isn't a joining line like here, I'm going to add it in and then bevel the corner. Oops, sorry, I'm going to bevel like that. So I'm going to do it down here as well, so I'm going to draw a line there, double click the edge loop, hit B for bevel, and bevel that in. And I'm going to do that around the entire logo. I've just reached the bottom of the B, and just to clarify this, basically we've got these edges here which are 90-degree angles, but you can't really draw an edge from there to anywhere. So what I'm going to do in this case is just select these top edges there and just bevel those normally. Now what this is going to do is create some extra sides to this polygon. So what you can do if you want is come in and select the edge slice tool and just draw that in like that, which gives us a quad there. And then we can come down to this bottom section and we can join this across here. So I'm going to use the edge slice tool there, double click this and bevel it. And by doing this we get a quad there, and a quad there as well, which is a good way to do your modeling. So I'm going to carry on. Now I've got a little bit of funky stuff going on over here on the top of the S. You'll notice that when we beveled this in and inset it, we've got some overlapping verts here. So what I can do is just come in here and move these slightly out of the way, like that. And that means that we can come in and bevel this guy without worrying about overlapping verts at the top here. If you still think they're a little close, you can kind of move them up a little bit. As this is all flat, these are at the same angle as this polygon, you can move them up and it's not going to change the smoothing or the bevel at all. So if you come across anything like that, you now know what to do. And this side seems fine, so I'm just going to carry on and then come back. Okay, so I've beveled all of the 90-degree edges, and now we've just got to take care of these middle polygons, such as this one in here, where it's clearly more than 4 or 3-sided. Now, instead of coming in and basically drawing edges to join up all these things, we're just going to triple them. It's going to save us a bit of time. So I'm going to select this polygon and hit Shift-T. Then I'm going to select this one and do the same, so Shift-T. I'm going to select these and hit Shift-T. And these two, and these two, and hit Shift-T. So we've got all of our triple polygons. We've got a beveled logo that we can now move into position. Okay, so if we zoom out to see where we are, we're going to start by moving the logo into the middle of the X-axis. So I'm going to select it all, come up to the Basic tab, and center selected on X. Now it's just a case of rotating it into position. So I'm going to hit the E key on my keyboard for the rotate tool, and then you can drag the red axis here. But if we hold down Control, we snap to 15-degree increments. So what I'm going to do is hold down Control and drag this until it reads -90 down here. With that done, I'm going to do the same on the blue circle, or the Z-axis. So I'll hold down Control and basically drag that until it reads 180. Then what I'm going to do is just activate the Move tool and pull this down below the pedal. Once that's done, I'll come to the bottom view. When the Move tool is still activated, we can use the Z arrow, the blue arrow, to move it roughly to the correct level. And then activate the Scale tool with the R key, and click and drag on the middle X there to get this roughly to the right size. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go to Perspective mode, activate the Move tool, and pull up on the Y-axis, turn upside down there. And basically what we want is just the logo to be sticking out just a little tiny bit. So something like that looks pretty good. So we have space to drop the tool, and our logo is positioned. With the logo done, we're now going to come up and save our project. So File, Save As, call it 6, logo done, hit enter, and we can move on to making the screws. Quickly before we move on, we're going to clear up a couple of things that I missed in the first part of this tutorial. Now I'm sure some of you caught it, but down here there is a 5-sided polygon with the 5th point being here. So we're going to have to clean that up, and that's on both sides. So I'm going to come up and turn symmetry onto the X, and with the main body layer selected, I'm going to select one of these back edges, hit Alt-C for the loop slice tool, and drag us out a new edge. And when that's about there, there's space to commit, and use the C key to activate the edge slice tool, and just draw in a new edge. With that done, I'm going to hide the pedal top layer, and you'll see this extrusion that we've got here, but it could probably do with some bevels, so I'm going to select all of these edges, come around to the back, select these guys as well, hit B for bevel, right click, and drag out just a simple bevel like that. Now the only problem with that is that it gives us these corner polygons that are now more than quad, so we need to fix those. And the quickest way of doing this would just be to draw an extra edge across there using the edge slice tool, so we get a quad and a tri. And because this is flat up here, that's actually okay and doesn't affect the smoothing at all. So you can come up and do this on this corner as well. So we want a quad and a tri, so what I'm going to do is come across there like this. And now all of these are good polygons, none of them are n-gons, which is what we want. So with that done, I'm going to bring back the pedal top and go into the bottom of the medal. And if we get rid of the bottom pad and the boss logo, you'll see that we've got this giant polygon that I didn't do anything about. So we're going to fix this now by coming up to Symmetry and turn it off. And then activate the bevel tool and right click in the viewport, and that creates the new geometry for the bevel. But instead of insetting it with the red handle, I'm going to press R on my keyboard for the scale tool, and instead we're just going to scale this in manually to about there. Then because it's going to be hidden behind the bottom pad, I'm going to hit delete, bring back the bottom pad, space to drop the scale tool, and come back up to the top. The last thing we're going to fix has to do with the reference images. Now if I come to the front view at the moment, you'll see this front ref, but we're actually seeing the back of the pedal, so we need to fix that. So I'm going to come up to perspective mode, then I'm going to come up here to the refs folder in our items list, bring that down and click on front ref. And then I'm going to come down to projection type and click on front and select back. Then I'm going to click on the back ref, come down to projection type and select front. Now what this does is essentially it flips the front and back. So if I come to the front view now, we're seeing the battery section of the model with this battery opening control knob. And if I come to the back of the model, we're seeing the power section of the pedal. But you'll notice that now we've got this power section in the ref and we're seeing the correct polys as well. So with that done, we can get on to modeling the rest of the details. After saving the scene, I'm going to move on to these power sections, which are these red squares. Now these are actually indents into the main body of the pedal, and clearly we don't have enough geometry to do that at the moment with this giant polygon here. So the first step is going to be using the loop slice tool to create extra vertical edges to either side of these red squares and horizontal edges to the top and the bottom of them. So it's a loop slice tool, which is Alt-C on your keyboard, and I'm going to do that now. After adding the extra edges, we now have these two polygons that we can work with, and we're going to start by beveling them in. So I'm going to activate the bevel tool, right click, we're going to inset once to add that ring of polygons around, shift click and inset again, and shift in slightly, shift click and pull them in a little bit further, shift click one more time, inset a bit, and shift a bit, and then space to drop the tool. We've created our inset. Now we need to bevel in these side edges. So what I'm going to do is select all but this very outer one, hit B for bevel, and bevel them out slightly. There's a little bit of cleanup that we have to do. If we zoom in, you'll see that these aren't quad or tri polygons. So on this corner, we're going to have to grab this vert on the edge of this tri and this vert, then come up to the vertex menu and click join, like that. And we're going to repeat that now for all of these edges on both of these insets. With the edges beveled, we can now go ahead and create the actual power blocks themselves. To do that, I'm going to select this back polygon and copy it with Ctrl-C. And then I'm going to create a new mesh item called Power Blocks and paste that polygon into there with Ctrl-V. I'll then move that out slightly so it's just past this edge of the main body. I'm then going to bevel it out slightly and in slightly, and then hit delete to get rid of this polygon. With that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the bevel tool. Double click this back edge, hit Z for the extend tool, and move this one back. Now if I take a look at our reference quickly, you'll see that we've got this circular hole to create there. So I'm going to come up to basic and click on the cylinder tool. I'm going to click in the middle of that white circle and drag out our cylinder. And if you let go, you can move that around as you wish. Now what I'm looking for are for the X and Y radiuses to be the same, so I'm going to set them both to 3mm, because that looks about right. We also need to take note of the sides as well, because that's the kind of resolution that we're going to get with the model. So if I move this out slightly, we take a look at it, you can see that with 16 sides, it looks fairly smooth. I mean, this is probably going to be as close as we're going to ever get, and it looks like a smooth circle. It doesn't look blocky or anything at all, so I think 16 sides is going to be enough, so I'm going to hit space to drop that. I'm going to select it and flip it, then come to a side view. We want to move it so it lines up with these front edges like that. With that done, I'm going to come to perspective mode. Now we've got 16 edges surrounding this cylinder, or this circle even, But the edge loop here, if I select it, it only shows 8 edges, so it's going to be a little tricky to join them together. Now the best thing to do would be add some extra edges to this unit. So what I'm going to do is select all of these outer edges, like these. I'm going to hit Alt-C for the loop slice tool, and with my count set to 2, I'm going to right click in the viewport so we add 2 extra edges along each edge that we had selected. With that done, I'm going to space to drop the tool, double click this edge loop, and you'll see we now have 16 edges here as well. Now we could come and fill in this space manually by selecting these verts and then creating a polygon, but we can also use one of Modo's built-in tools, which is called the bridge tool. And it's over here in the polygon menu under bridge. So what we need to do for that is select both of these edge loops. So I'm going to hold down Shift and select both of these guys. Come up here and select the bridge tool. And what it does is it takes one of these edges on the loops and tries to find the closest edge on the other loop that it can connect to. If it finds one, so say this edge could connect to here, it's going to connect them up with a quad polygon. It then moves on to the next edge. Now sometimes this initially looks a bit strange, so it could go great, it could go wrong. So I'm going to right click, and you see that everything looks as expected. Sometimes it'll look like that, with edges connecting all the way across the polygons and everything looks a bit weird and messed up. When that happens, you can try and play around with some of these options, and the first one I go to is usually reverse orient, which is this guy here, and if you click that on and off, hopefully it should change to something better. If it doesn't, you can try the twist. What this does is it changes the order of where the edges are connecting to each other, but twist 0 for this one seems to work. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, then we can select that middle polygon and start beveling. I'm going to bevel it in once to add that extra edge of polygons, one more time and shift it in slightly to create that outer bevel, and then going to pull it back a little bit. Now instead of deleting it, we're going to use it to create the pin that is inside of the power unit. So I'm going to hit Ctrl X to cut it, come to new item and create power pin and paste it into there. And what we want is basically that to be towards the back of this inset. So I'm going to come inside the pedal and move this back to here. And now it's just a case of beveling this into the correct shape. So I'm going to activate the bevel tool with the B key and pull this out slightly, and then going to shift click and inset it all the way in to about there, maybe a little bit further. I'll then shift click again and pull this all the way out, maybe not quite that far. And now I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. I'm going to select this end edge loop and hit B for the bevel tool and bevel that guy in. We're going to up the round level to about 2, pull that in a bit further. Then you notice this end polygon is nowhere near quad or anything, so I'm going to select it and bevel in once. And without deselecting the bevel tool, I'm going to come up to Vertex and click Join Averaged. And what that does is it joins the currently selected polygon into one vertice. So with that done, we've now got our power unit completely completed, and we can copy it over to the other hole. So I'm going to select both mesh layers, double click both meshes, come to our back view, hit Ctrl C to copy, Ctrl V to paste, and just move them into position. Like that. And that is the power units done.